The restaurant was buzzing with the usual evening energy. The soft clinking of cutlery against plates, low chatter from diners, and the occasional laugh created a lively atmosphere. Among all this, a young waitress moved carefully from table to table, balancing trays filled with food and drinks. She had been working there for a couple of years, and though the job was exhausting, she loved interacting with people and seeing the little joys on their faces when they were served well. Tonight, like many others, she was focused on giving her best service, moving swiftly but gracefully through the crowded space. As she approached a large table near the window, she noticed a man enter the restaurant. He was dressed in a sharp suit, and there was an air of confidence around him that immediately drew the eyes of a few diners. It was clear that he was someone important, someone used to attention. The man walked with purpose, accompanied by a couple of assistants carrying briefcases. The waitress felt a small pang of nerves, knowing that serving someone like him could be challenging. She had seen celebrities, politicians, and businessmen come in before, but there was something about him that felt different. She straightened her posture and took a deep breath. As he approached her table, he gave a polite nod and sat down without much small talk. She smiled warmly, introducing herself and handing over the menu. "Good evening, sir. Here is the menu. Please let me know if you need any recommendations," she said, her voice soft but confident. He glanced at the menu for a moment before looking back at her with a faint smirk. As she explained the specials of the day, she stumbled slightly over a word. English wasn't her first language, and sometimes she struggled with certain phrases, especially when under pressure. The man noticed immediately. A laugh escaped him, sharp and dismissive. "Is this your English?" he asked, his tone laced with amusement. The words made her pause, a flush creeping up her cheeks. She had encountered rude comments before, but there was something about the way he said it that made the room feel smaller, almost suffocating. Despite the embarrassment, she kept her composure. She forced a small smile, nodding politely. "Yes, sir, I'm very sorry. I will do my best," she replied, hoping to move on quickly. She could feel the weight of his gaze, judging every word, every gesture. A few diners nearby turned to watch, sensing the tension. The room seemed to quiet down slightly, the usual chatter fading into the background as all eyes subtly followed the interaction. She took his order carefully, double-checking each item to ensure she got it right. As she repeated it back, she could hear the faint chuckle again, and a remark about her accent. It stung, but she reminded herself that this was part of the job. Some people could be difficult, and she had learned over time not to take such comments personally. She had dreams beyond this restaurant, ambitions to travel and learn more languages, and she refused to let one person's mockery shake her confidence. Once the order was placed, she went to the kitchen, carefully balancing the tray of drinks to deliver them without spilling a drop. Her co-workers gave her encouraging smiles, knowing she had been through similar situations before. She kept her head high, moving with precision, focusing on the task at hand. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air, calming her nerves slightly. She reminded herself that she was capable, and that confidence often came from within. As she returned to the table with the drinks, the man raised an eyebrow, his smirk still present. She placed the drinks carefully in front of him, maintaining eye contact briefly before stepping back to let him enjoy the menu. The assistants whispered quietly among themselves, but she ignored them, knowing their curiosity was natural. She took a deep breath and waited patiently, ready for the next part of the interaction. When he finally decided on the order, he asked a question about a dish, speaking quickly and assuming she would understand perfectly. She listened carefully, processing his words, and then responded as best as she could. Her English was clear, though slightly accented, and she made sure to use gestures to help communicate more effectively. The man's smile faltered slightly as he realized she understood more than he initially assumed. Yet, he made another comment about her language skills, this time a bit louder so that nearby diners could hear. The words were cutting, and a few people glanced over, feeling uncomfortable for her. The waitress felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, there was embarrassment and a desire to shrink away. On the other, there was a spark of determination. She had worked hard to get where she was, and she knew that intelligence and ability were not measured by accent alone. She reminded herself to stay calm, to stay professional, and to keep moving forward. Every smile, every polite word, was a small victory in reclaiming her dignity. She continued to serve the table throughout the evening, keeping a careful balance between attentiveness and distance. Each time she approached with a dish or a refill, she made sure her movements were precise and graceful. She used her best manners, her most pleasant tone, and quietly observed the reactions of the man and his assistants. There was a subtle shift happening, though she didn't yet realize it. He was watching closely, perhaps starting to see that the person he had underestimated was capable and composed. In the midst of the evening rush, she had a moment to glance at the other tables. Families laughed, friends chatted, and couples enjoyed their meals. It reminded her why she loved this work despite the challenges. Each customer was a story, a life she got to touch briefly through her service. This thought gave her strength, grounding her as she prepared to handle the final interactions with the CEO and his entourage. As she approached him for the last time before the meal arrived, she straightened her uniform and took a deep breath. She knew that this dinner could be more than just serving food. It could be a chance to show her confidence, her intelligence, and her ability to remain composed under pressure. With a calm smile, she placed the final plate on the table, ready to face whatever came next, and unaware that the moment that would change everything was just around the corner. After taking the last plate to the table, the waitress stepped back and wiped her hands on her apron. The restaurant was still lively, but she could feel the tension at the CEO's table, a subtle electricity in the air. He continued to glance at her occasionally, a mix of curiosity and amusement in his expression. She knew that despite his teasing, the real test was not only in serving the food correctly but in showing patience and confidence. She reminded herself to stay composed, focusing on her work while silently proving her capability. As she moved through the tables delivering meals, her mind briefly wandered back to the moment when he laughed at her English. Still stung, but she refused to let it define her. She had faced judgments before and had always come through stronger. She thought about how language could sometimes hide true intelligence. Her accent did not reflect her knowledge, her determination, or her ability to handle complex situations. These were qualities that no laugh or sarcastic comment could diminish. Returning to his table with drinks, she noticed he had begun to look at the menu more carefully. He asked about a few dishes in a way that seemed to test her, perhaps assuming she wouldn't know much about them. She listened carefully, nodding, and answered with confidence, describing ingredients and flavors accurately. She made sure her explanations were clear and precise. She could see him slightly raising his eyebrows, surprised that she knew so much, yet he maintained his smirk, as if trying to keep the upper hand. Around the restaurant, the evening continued in full swing. Families laughed, couples chatted quietly, and friends shared stories over their meals. Despite the bustling environment, she focused on her table, knowing that one small misstep could be noticed immediately. She reminded herself to breathe, to maintain a friendly demeanor, and to stay attentive. Every smile and gesture was a chance to show her professionalism and grace. As the meal progressed, the CEO began making more comments about her English, this time louder, ensuring other diners could hear. The words were cutting, and for a moment, she felt the familiar sting of embarrassment. A few nearby diners glanced over, sensing the tension. She could have flinched, could have felt small and shaken, but instead, she straightened her back, held her head high, and maintained her composure. She knew that dignity in moments like these was as important as the service she provided. Her mind worked quickly, thinking of ways to communicate more effectively without escalating the situation. She decided to rely on calm confidence and clear explanations. Every response she gave was precise and thoughtful. When he asked about wine pairings, she explained the options carefully, using gestures and simple phrases to clarify. She wanted him to understand, but she also wanted to show that she was intelligent and capable. With each answer, she noticed a subtle shift in his demeanor, though he still tried to hide it behind his composed exterior. While she continued serving, she remembered stories from colleagues who had faced similar situations with demanding customers. They had advised her to remain calm, to avoid showing frustration, and to handle challenges with poise. She thought of these lessons as tools, reminding herself that patience and professionalism could change how people perceived her. It wasn't just about serving food, it was about proving that she could hold her own under pressure. The CEO leaned back in his chair, watching her with what seemed like growing curiosity. His assistants were quieter now, observing the interaction closely. The waitress felt the subtle power shift, though she didn't yet fully understand it. She moved to refill water glasses and clear empty plates, ensuring each action was smooth and careful. Her body language was confident, calm, and controlled, showing that she was in charge of her role despite his initial mockery. As she delivered the dessert menu, the CEO asked her a tricky question about one of the items, speaking quickly in English. She paused for a moment, thinking carefully about her response, then explained the dessert in detail, describing textures, flavors, and ingredients accurately. Her voice was steady and clear. The CEO's smirk faltered slightly as he realized she had a strong grasp of what she was talking about. A few diners nearby began whispering, intrigued by the interaction and noticing how poised she was under scrutiny. The waitress felt a quiet satisfaction. She had handled the difficult situation without losing her composure. She knew that sometimes, moments of challenge could reveal one's strength. She also knew that actions often spoke louder than words. By remaining professional, confident, and calm, she had begun to change the perception of the man who had mocked her. The air around the table felt different now, charged with a mix of respect and curiosity. As the evening went on, she continued to serve other tables while keeping an eye on his table. She noticed small gestures, the way he leaned slightly forward, the subtle way he listened more intently than before. She didn't let it distract her, but it gave her a sense that her efforts were making a difference. It reminded her that intelligence and grace could shine through even in the face of judgment. When she cleared the last plates, the CEO made a comment that seemed less mocking and more intrigued. He asked a personal question, curious about her background and how she came to learn so much about food and service. She answered politely, giving small but meaningful details about her experiences, the languages she was learning, and her passion for hospitality. She spoke with warmth and honesty, and she could see his expression change, a flicker of genuine interest replacing the initial amusement. The assistants looked surprised, whispering among themselves, while the CEO remained quiet for a moment, processing her words. She realized that the balance of power had shifted subtly. His perception of her was no longer based on her accent or her English. It was based on her knowledge, her composure, and her confidence. She felt a quiet sense of triumph, not in proving him wrong, but in standing firm in her abilities. Finally, she stepped back, giving him space while maintaining a friendly smile. She had navigated the difficult part of the evening, showing that her intelligence and professionalism went far beyond what he had assumed. As she moved on to help other customers, she felt a sense of calm accomplishment. The challenge had been handled gracefully, and though the evening wasn't over, she knew she had made a strong impression. She looked forward to what would come next, unaware that the moment when her true abilities would shine even brighter was approaching. The evening carried on, and the restaurant hummed with a mixture of conversations, laughter, and the soft clatter of dishes. The waitress moved steadily from table to table, her movements practiced but careful. Her mind, however, kept returning to the CEO's table. She had noticed small shifts in his demeanor, moments of surprise, curiosity, and perhaps even admiration. She couldn't let herself relax completely yet. This was a moment that could define the rest of her evening, and possibly more. When she approached with a fresh tray of drinks, the CEO asked a question that caught her off guard. He spoke quickly with a mixture of English and German, expecting her to stumble. The words rolled out fast, and for a moment, she felt the familiar tension in her chest. But she steadied herself, taking a deep breath and recalling everything she had learned over the years. With clarity and confidence, she answered in perfect German, describing the menu item in detail, explaining flavors, textures, and ingredients with precision. The room seemed to hold its breath. Nearby diners paused their conversations, sensing the unusual shift in the atmosphere. The CEO froze mid-smile, his previous smirk replaced by a flicker of shock. He had not expected this. The waitress's ability to respond fluently in German stunned him, showing a side of her intelligence he had not imagined. For a few moments, no one spoke, and the clatter of the restaurant felt distant, like it had paused for this singular interaction. Her co-workers peeked from the kitchen, curious and impressed. They had seen her manage difficult customers before, but this was different. The CEO's reaction was visible, and it was clear that the power dynamic had shifted. The waitress remained composed, her tone calm, and her smile polite. She could feel the quiet respect beginning to form, though she did not let it affect her behavior. Professionalism and grace were her tools, and she used them carefully. The CEO's assistants exchanged glances, whispering quietly to each other. They had never seen their boss so visibly taken aback. He usually remained in control, unshaken by small challenges, but this was different. The waitress had not only answered correctly, but she had done so with confidence and poise. It was impossible for anyone present not to notice the change. She continued to interact with him, taking orders, refilling glasses, and answering questions about the menu. Every response she gave was measured, precise, and fluent, both in English and when a few German words were used. The CEO's initial amusement was replaced by curiosity. He leaned forward slightly, listening more intently, no longer trying to belittle her but genuinely interested. This subtle change energized her, reinforcing that remaining calm and confident could transform even the most difficult situations. Around the restaurant, life carried on, but whispers occasionally floated toward her. A few diners discussed quietly among themselves, impressed by the scene at the large table. She kept her focus, moving between tables, balancing service with awareness. Each smile, each gesture, was deliberate and careful, showcasing her professionalism. She reminded herself that dignity often spoke louder than words, and intelligence was often revealed in unexpected ways. The CEO asked another question, more complex this time, regarding a wine pairing for a particular dish. She paused briefly, considering the options, then answered clearly and accurately, explaining the balance of flavors and textures. His expression shifted again, from shock to genuine interest. He seemed to reassess everything he had assumed about her. It was clear that her knowledge, confidence, and composure were changing the way he saw her entirely. She could sense a shift in the room's energy. The initial tension caused by his mocking laughter had transformed into quiet respect. Even the staff who had been watching were subtly nodding to themselves, recognizing her strength. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, to answer with intelligence, and to maintain a polite, professional demeanor had captivated everyone at the table. The assistants tried to maintain a neutral expression, but they were clearly intrigued. They whispered quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing at their boss, who now seemed more contemplative than critical. The waitress noticed this subtle change and felt a small, quiet sense of satisfaction. She had handled the situation not by confrontation, but by demonstrating her capabilities calmly and confidently. As dessert was served, the CEO continued to observe her. He asked another question, this time about her background and how she had learned to speak multiple languages. She responded politely, explaining that she had worked hard to learn languages, driven by curiosity and a desire to grow beyond her immediate surroundings. Her story was simple, but it carried the weight of determination and resilience. He listened, clearly impressed, though he tried to hide it initially. The atmosphere at the table shifted further. What had begun as an awkward interaction, tinged with mockery, had evolved into a respectful exchange. The CEO's tone softened, and his questions became more genuine. He seemed less interested in testing her and more interested in understanding her. Her composed, intelligent responses had earned his attention in a way that no argument or confrontation could have. The waitress felt a sense of quiet pride. She had faced ridicule, Yet she had turned the situation into an opportunity to show her true abilities. She understood that life often presented challenges that tested not just skills, but character. Her ability to remain calm, professional, and confident had allowed her to rise above the mockery and earn genuine respect. She realized that moments like these, though difficult, could be transformative. As the evening progressed, she continued to serve other customers, but her eyes occasionally drifted toward the CEO's table. The man had leaned back, watching her with a new awareness, and even his assistants seemed to regard her differently. She kept her focus on her work, though, ensuring every table received the attention and care they deserved. Her professionalism had not only impressed a demanding customer, but had also set an example for those around her. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the long hours of study, the language lessons, and the dedication to her craft. Each effort had built the foundation for moments like this, where her abilities could shine even under pressure. She reminded herself that perseverance and confidence were powerful tools, often more impactful than immediate results. Her calm and intelligent approach had turned a challenging interaction into a demonstration of her worth and capability. Finally, as the last plates were cleared from the CEO's table, she offered a polite smile and a nod, signaling that everything was complete. He returned the gesture, a subtle acknowledgement of her skill and composure. It was not a loud applause, but it carried weight, a quiet recognition that she had handled a difficult situation with grace. The evening had not only tested her patience, but had also revealed her strength, intelligence, and professionalism in a way that no mockery could undermine. The waitress took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. She had faced ridicule, yet emerged with dignity intact. She had answered cleverly and confidently, demonstrating that her skills and intelligence could not be judged by accent or initial impressions. She knew that this moment was just one of many challenges she would face, but it had reinforced her belief in herself and in the power of patience, grace, and quiet confidence. The night continued around her, but she carried with her a newfound sense of accomplishment, ready for whatever came next. As the evening continued, the atmosphere at the restaurant remained lively, yet there was a subtle focus on the table near the window. The waitress moved gracefully among the diners, serving orders, clearing plates, and checking that everything was in order. Her composure had not gone unnoticed, especially by the CEO, who now seemed more intrigued than dismissive. Every time she approached, he listened carefully, no longer with a smirk, but with genuine interest. He began asking her more questions, not about the menu this time, but about her background. He inquired about her education, the languages she had learned, and how she had developed such confidence despite being young and working in a demanding environment. She answered politely and honestly, describing her journey in simple, humble words. She spoke about long hours of practice, lessons learned from life, and her desire to improve herself constantly. She did not boast, but her words carried a quiet strength and sincerity that was impossible to ignore. The CEO leaned forward slightly, clearly impressed. He seemed to reflect on his own assumptions, realizing that he had misjudged her based on a small detail, her accent. He listened intently, asking follow-up questions about her ambitions and goals. She explained how she wanted to learn more languages, travel, and explore opportunities beyond her current job. Each answer was calm and deliberate, revealing a thoughtful and intelligent person beneath the surface. Her professionalism and confidence had begun to change not only his perception but also the energy around the table. His assistants exchanged quiet looks, astonished at their boss's reaction. The other diners occasionally glanced at the scene, noticing how the young waitress had maintained her dignity despite earlier mockery. There was a growing sense of respect, unspoken but palpable. The waitress continued to serve with care, all the while engaging in this subtle exchange. When he asked a technical question about a wine selection, she provided a precise answer, explaining the flavors and the best pairings. Her voice was calm, clear, and confident. The CEO nodded slightly, impressed not only by her knowledge but by the way she handled herself, with such grace and humility. She could feel the change in dynamics. The mockery that had filled the air earlier was gone, replaced by curiosity and respect. The CEO seemed to be reassessing everything he had assumed about her. Her ability to stay composed under pressure and to respond intelligently had transformed his view completely. He now appeared genuinely interested in understanding who she was, rather than trying to belittle her. During a quiet moment, he asked her about her family, her experiences, and what had motivated her to pursue learning languages and new skills. She spoke with honesty, sharing that she had always been driven by curiosity and the desire to grow. Her journey had been challenging, but every difficulty had taught her resilience and patience. She explained that she had learned that being polite, attentive, and hardworking could take her far, no matter what others thought or said. He listened closely, nodding occasionally, and asked thoughtful follow-up questions. The initial tension had completely vanished. What had started as a moment of embarrassment had become a meaningful conversation. He seemed genuinely impressed by her determination and intelligence. His previous smirk was replaced by a subtle smile, one that conveyed acknowledgement and newfound respect. Throughout the evening, she maintained her usual composure, moving efficiently between tables, ensuring all diners received excellent service. Her professionalism never wavered, and it became clear that she had earned the CEO's respect without ever needing to confront him aggressively. Her quiet confidence and the ability to respond thoughtfully and fluently had spoken volumes about her character. The assistants observed silently, recognizing that their boss was seeing someone entirely differently than he had before. Even among the staff, there was a quiet admiration. The young waitress had demonstrated that intelligence, grace, and composure were more valuable than outward appearances or first impressions. Her actions had commanded respect naturally and subtly. As the dessert course arrived, the CEO asked a few more questions, this time about her future plans. She spoke openly about her ambitions, about learning more languages, and perhaps one day working in roles that allowed her to interact with diverse people and cultures. Her words were measured and sincere, revealing her clarity of thought and self-awareness. The CEO seemed genuinely interested, listening intently and occasionally nodding, reflecting on her journey. At this point, a quiet admiration had developed. What had started as ridicule and mockery had completely transformed into a respectful conversation. The CEO had begun to realize that assumptions based on minor details like an accent could be misleading. The waitress had shown not only intelligence but also a level of composure and dignity that demanded recognition. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, answer intelligently, and maintain a polite demeanor had shifted the balance entirely. She had shown that competence and confidence could speak louder than sarcasm or judgment. By staying true to herself and her abilities, she had turned a potentially humiliating experience into a moment of personal victory. The CEO finally leaned back, exhaling slightly, and offered a small smile that carried genuine acknowledgement. It was a subtle gesture but one loaded with meaning. He had witnessed resilience, intelligence, and humility in action. The young waitress had not only handled a difficult situation with grace, but had also left a lasting impression, altering how he viewed her completely. Even the assistants seemed impressed, quietly observing the transformation in their boss's attitude. Other diners occasionally glanced toward the table, noticing the respectful interaction that had replaced the tension from earlier. The energy around the table was calm and positive, a stark contrast to the initial discomfort. The waitress continued her work, ensuring each table received careful attention. She knew that her role as a server was important, but tonight, her actions had communicated far more than service alone. They had demonstrated intelligence, patience, and the ability to rise above judgment and mockery. She understood that respect was earned not by confrontation but through consistent composure and competence. As the meal concluded, the CEO asked one final question, inquiring about her future goals once more. She responded with clarity and warmth, speaking about her ambitions, her desire to learn, and her hope to explore new opportunities. He listened quietly, nodding and reflecting, clearly impressed. What had begun as a mocking interaction had transformed into a meaningful acknowledgement of talent, perseverance, and potential. The waitress felt a quiet satisfaction. She had faced ridicule but remained unshaken, demonstrating professionalism, intelligence, and grace. She had answered cleverly and confidently, showing that her abilities could not be underestimated. The evening had not only tested her patience but had also revealed the true measure of her character. She understood that dignity, composure, and self-belief could change even the most challenging situations. As she moved away from the table for the last time that evening, she knew that she had left an impression far greater than expected. The CEO had witnessed her strength, intelligence, and poise. He now seemed to respect her abilities and character in a way that was unmistakable. The interaction had evolved from mockery to genuine recognition, and she carried with her a sense of quiet accomplishment. The evening had proven that true strength often showed in how one handled challenges, and she had done so with elegance and confidence, leaving a lasting mark on everyone present. As the evening drew closer to its end, the atmosphere in the restaurant gradually began to calm. The chatter of diners still filled the air, but the intensity that had surrounded the CEO's table earlier had softened into quiet respect and curiosity. The waitress moved between tables with the same grace and attentiveness she had maintained all night, making sure every customer received care and attention. Her mind, however, often drifted back to the large table near the window, where the CEO and his assistants had been watching her closely. When she approached to clear the final plates and refill the water glasses, the CEO looked up at her and smiled, this time without any hint of mockery. It was a small gesture, yet it carried a weight that she could not ignore. It was an acknowledgement of her professionalism, her intelligence, and the way she had conducted herself despite the initial ridicule. She returned the smile politely, keeping her composure, and thanked him for his time, as she did with every customer. He leaned back in his chair and asked a question that seemed sincere rather than challenging. He wanted to know more about her ambitions, what she hoped to achieve in the future, and how she planned to grow beyond her current role. She responded honestly, speaking about her desire to continue learning languages, to gain experiences that would broaden her horizons, and to someday work in a place where she could make a meaningful impact. Her words were simple, humble, yet carried the depth of someone who had worked hard for every small step she had taken. The CEO listened intently, nodding occasionally, clearly impressed. He seemed to reflect quietly on his earlier assumptions, realizing that he had judged her too quickly based on her accent and the initial difficulty with English. The assistants exchanged subtle looks, noticing the transformation in both their boss's attitude and the respect he now showed the young woman. It was a remarkable shift, and they could not help but admire the way she had handled the situation. Throughout the evening, the waitress had demonstrated not only her ability to perform her job well, but also the strength of her character. She had faced public ridicule, yet she had maintained her dignity, composure, and professionalism. She had answered intelligently and confidently, never allowing herself to be flustered or discouraged. It was clear that these qualities had left a lasting impression on the CEO. He spoke again, this time with genuine interest, asking how she had managed to learn so many things on her own and how she had developed such resilience. She explained that her journey had not been easy, but every challenge had taught her patience, focus, and determination. She described the effort she had put into learning languages, understanding different cultures, and preparing herself for opportunities beyond the restaurant. Her words were measured and sincere, revealing the inner strength that had carried her through difficult moments. As she spoke, he listened without interruption, his earlier smirk replaced by a look of thoughtful reflection. He seemed to recognize that her abilities and intelligence were far greater than he had initially imagined. The respect in his eyes was evident, and she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing that she had earned it without having to confront him aggressively. Her calm confidence had spoken louder than any words of defiance could have. The other diners began to notice the subtle shift in the table's energy. What had started as a tense, uncomfortable scene had transformed into a quiet, respectful interaction. People whispered softly, impressed by the young woman's composure and intelligence. Even the assistants appeared more relaxed, realizing that their boss was genuinely impressed and that the interaction had been a learning moment for him as well. The waitress continued her work, moving gracefully to serve other tables. But she kept an eye on the CEO's table, sensing that the moment was approaching when the evening's events would reach their peak. She felt a mixture of anticipation and calm, knowing that the way she carried herself could still influence the outcome of the night. She remained attentive, professional, and composed, fully aware of the impact her actions had already made. Finally, as the meal concluded, the CEO stood up and called her over. The restaurant seemed to quiet slightly, as if the evening had paused to observe what was about to happen. He spoke directly to her, his tone sincere and respectful. He acknowledged his earlier behavior, admitting that he had underestimated her and judged her unfairly. He praised her intelligence, her composure, and the way she had handled a difficult situation with grace. His words were genuine, and she could see that he truly respected her now. The waitress listened politely, maintaining her usual calm demeanor. She accepted the acknowledgement with a simple nod and a courteous smile, showing that she held no resentment and that her professionalism remained intact. The CEO's expression softened further, and he asked if she would be interested in opportunities that could help her grow and develop her skills even more. He mentioned mentoring, networking, and even potential job opportunities that could take her beyond her current role. Her heart raced slightly, but she kept her composure. She expressed gratitude for his offer, explaining that she was open to learning and growing whenever the opportunity arose. She spoke sincerely, making it clear that she valued the experience and insight she had gained from the evening. Her words reflected humility, intelligence, and readiness to embrace new challenges. The CEO nodded, clearly pleased with her response. He offered a handshake, which she accepted politely, maintaining eye contact and confidence. It was a moment of mutual respect, where past judgments were replaced by recognition of talent, character, and potential. The assistants quietly observed, understanding that the young woman had not only won their boss's respect but had also left a lasting impression on everyone present. As she stepped back, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The evening had begun with ridicule and mockery, but had transformed into a series of interactions that showcased her strength, intelligence, and grace. She had faced challenges, maintained composure, and earned respect, turning what could have been a humiliating experience into a meaningful and empowering one. The restaurant gradually returned to its usual rhythm as other diners finished their meals and left. The staff congratulated her quietly, impressed by the way she had handled the situation. She felt a sense of pride, not from the attention, but from knowing that she had remained true to herself and demonstrated her abilities under pressure. Her calm confidence had changed perceptions, showing that character and intelligence could shine even in the face of judgment. Before leaving, the CEO offered a final remark, encouraging her to continue pursuing her goals and to never let anyone's assumptions limit her potential. He thanked her sincerely for her service, her composure, and her intelligence. The words were genuine, and she could see that he truly meant them. It was a moment of recognition and respect, the culmination of an evening that had tested her patience, resilience, and professionalism. She nodded politely, expressing her gratitude once again, and returned to her duties, feeling a sense of fulfillment that went beyond the immediate recognition. The evening had taught her the power of calm confidence, intelligence, and grace in transforming challenging situations into opportunities. She understood that her actions had made a lasting impression, not just on the CEO but on everyone who had witnessed the interaction. As the last guests left the restaurant, she reflected on the night's events. What had begun as a potentially humiliating experience had become a defining moment, highlighting her strength, character, and potential. She had proven that intelligence, composure, and professionalism could overcome judgment and mockery. The respect she had earned was a reminder that true strength often revealed itself in the way one handled challenges, and she had done so with dignity and grace. The night ended with a quiet sense of triumph. The young waitress had faced ridicule, remained composed, and turned the situation into a moment of recognition and respect. Her calm confidence and intelligence had changed perceptions, earning genuine acknowledgement from someone who had initially underestimated her. She left the restaurant that evening with a renewed sense of self-belief, ready to embrace future opportunities, knowing that her abilities, grace, and determination would always shine through, no matter the challenges ahead.